Big news! CityCast Boise has been nominated for the Best Podcast in Boise Weekly's Best of Boise contest. Now we just need you to make it official by voting for us. Every day we bring you sharp news breakdowns, insider event tips, and the tastiest food recommendations in town, so you never miss what makes our city amazing. And this is your chance to help us shine. Voting's open till May 23rd. It's easy and only takes a few minutes. Just click the link in the show notes. Thanks, everybody. Today on CityCast Boise, we've been named one of the best communities to raise a family. But are we actually creating a place our kids want to live? Boise City Council just launched a youth roadmap survey to find out. We're digging into how it could shape community initiatives for years to come and whether young people will really get a say in our future. It's Monday, May 19th. I'm Lindsay Van Allen, and this is what Boise's talking about. Joining me today is Boise City Council member Jimmy Hallyburton. Thanks so much for being here today, Jimmy.
Oh, thank you so much. It's an honor. I'm excited to be here.
I really want to jump in and find out more about this youth roadmap. So what inspired the creation of the youth roadmap, and why is it a focus of the city right now?
Well, one of the first things I always like to talk about when we're talking about this new roadmap, this new initiative, is that the city of Boise historically really has been a great place for youth to grow up. I grew up here. I loved growing up here. And there are so many things that we're doing well. And that does not mean that we can't do better. I think one of the things that we know both in Boise and in Idaho is that we have a huge youth mental health crisis. And unfortunately and tragically, we've even had quite a few youth suicides and teen suicides right here in Boise. And when this started to happen, it started to pop up after the pandemic, I think a lot of people started asking themselves, what can we do about it? And one of the things that I've known since I've worked with youth my entire life, 16 years of the Boise Bicycle Project, the best solutions always happen when we engage with the people who are experiencing those problems the most. And in this case, we're talking about our youth and we're talking about our teens. So we really wanted to give an opportunity for our youth and our teens to guide a process that would help Boise set a long-term vision to address issues that would make Boise a better place to be a kid and a teenager and to grow up and to stay and all those types of things. So we launched this youth initiative just to do that.
Okay, so Jimmy, where in the process are we? I know it was recently announced, but can you kind of give me an overview of what this process might look like and where we're at right now?
Perfect. I'll get into the weeds just a little bit. So City Council approved the funds to launch this new initiative in 2024, really to get it launched in 2025 and get things ready to go and do a year-long process in developing this roadmap. And you can kind of think of it as like a master plan that has tons of community engagement. And right now, we've just gotten to the point where we have launched that first community-wide survey. And so the survey is out there. It's open for another month or so. It'll be closed at the end of June. And right now, we're trying to get as many youth and teens, people who work with teens, parents, anybody who are involved with youth in our community filling out this survey. At the end of the summer, we'll have all of this data compiled, all of these interviews, all of these survey results, and then we'll have 3 different advisory committees: a teen advisory committee, a staff advisory committee at the city of Boise, and then what we call our community stakeholder group. So you can think of like the Boise School District, nonprofits, anybody who's working with teens, and they're going to begin taking all this information and figuring out, okay, what do we do with this and how can we get a plan going forward? You can begin getting involved as much as you want to, and there's tons of time for involvement all the way up until the end of fall before it comes in front of council. But now is the time for folks to get involved, and the process is just beginning for the public. So we are so excited to get people jumping in here.
So it sounds like very early days. And you mentioned a lot about youth, mental health, teens. Let's say I'm a parent to, a 5-year-old and a 7-year-old. Is this a survey I should look at taking, or is this more focused on teens and people who work with young adults?
Well, you should do 2 things. One, as a parent or someone who's involved with youth, you should take the survey yourself. Because the very first question that you're going to get asked is, what part of Boise do you live in and what is your age range? And depending on what you click for your age range, it's going to ask you a completely different set of questions. So what is it like raising a kid in Boise? What are the obstacles that your children are facing? So we definitely want adults who are working with kids or who have kids to fill out the survey. And my ask for you, Lindsay, is that you would then fill that survey again with your kids. So if they're, 4 or 7 years old, have them complete the survey, but be there to walk them through it. Ask them the questions, see what they have to say. Of course, if they're teens, they probably don't need your help and they can do that on their own. So we want those teens filling that out. And so we want to make sure that we're getting as many different viewpoints as possible. And we're really talking about children of all ages.
Okay, spoiler, Jimmy, I did take the survey in preparation for this interview because I was really curious what topics you would be looking at or what would be included in the survey. And it was pretty comprehensive. Lots of questions about mental health concerns, potential mentorship opportunities, programs in schools, transportation safety, on and on and on. So I'm really curious, realistically, what kind of programs do you see that might come out of this initiative? Are you thinking there could be mentorship programs, recreational activities, mental health services, job readiness, or maybe a combination of all of those?
I think that there could definitely be those things. The way that I sort of look at this is it's going to create a lens for the city to look through for all of our planning that we have going forward. So it's going to be a document that we adopt to the city's master plan. And that will mean that every single decision that we make going forward, we'll have to wait and we'll have to say, wait a second, we adopted this youth roadmap. Let's look at this through a youth lens. What more can we do in these areas? And so I think of it as something even bigger than just a list of action items. I see it as a different way that we look at everything that we do in the city. As far as like those actual tangible results, here's would be like a good example. We know that we're doing a lot of great stuff for younger kids in the community. So we've got community centers at several different schools. And once those kids get to 6th grade in the Boise School District, they're done at that community center. So this after school program that they've had access to for a really long period of time, they no longer have a specific place to go. And they still may have parents who aren't getting home for a while. So maybe when we're building these new community centers in the future, we need to be building specific community centers for teens. And maybe those community centers need to have a mental health component where there is an on-site person who can help students with mental health issues. And so I think about it sort of in that sort of way. Another really good example is when we're building a park in the city of Boise. You go to all these amazing parks and they always have a really great playground. And then they usually have like softball fields and things for adults. And they don't always have things for tweens and teens to be able to go and do. And we've actually seen some neighboring cities develop parks specifically for teens. And what does that look like? It might have a skate park. It might have a bike park. It might have places to hang hammocks. So if we actually asked teens and we said, hey, if we were building a new park, what are all the things that you would want to see in the park? So it's really trying to get into the lens of looking at things through youth and how to get youth more involved in all of our decision-making going forward.
I love that so much because I also have kids kind of in that in-between space where they don't really want to be on the playground equipment. That's not cool anymore. But we're struggling to find third spaces in the community for them that aren't a store or a mall. And not that those are wrong, but like an outdoor space or a space that they can just hang out with their friends that feel accessible to them if they don't want to be on playground equipment or don't want to be actively playing a sport at that time. So that is definitely something I have heard from my own kids. So I'm really curious to see how other children and families around the community feel about that. But just from my perspective, that would be huge for our family.
Yeah. And when I completed the survey and I did it as well, I was thinking about that a lot. Like, what are the places where our teens and tweens would want to go that don't exist right now? What are the spaces that they would like to be able to hang out with? And usually it's not with a bunch of adults. And usually it's not with a bunch of really little kids. They kind of want their own space and everybody would. And then there's the second problem is like, how do they get there? And so there's these different kinds of barriers that we have to be thinking about what it is like for a 14-year-old who wants to go and do things, but is relying on their parents who are maybe working 2 jobs or a single parent or whatever it may be. So if they had better access to public transportation, or if they had an off-street bikeway they could get to from their house to a park, to a teen center, what are the things that we need to make sure that we're addressing to get them access to all the places that they want to go? And we know that there's gaps there. And again, typically we're building things for adults who are trying to get to work, or where are they going to park, or, bicycle infrastructure that makes it really comfortable for someone like me who's confident riding, but maybe not a teenager on a scooter or something like that. So we have to be thinking about this very holistically. And that's what I really appreciated about the survey is, we're talking about infrastructure that teens want to see. We're talking about mental health issues. We're talking about creating comfortable spaces. We're talking about how are the youth going to get there. And so really trying to look at these things again from that really youth focused lens of, hey, what would it be like to be a 14-year-old in Boise? And how can we make sure that we're creating a place for them with their voice leading the way?
My cat Freddie loves to be brushed and cuddled. But stirring up his cat allergens meant sneezing and itchy eyes. Then I found Purina One Live Clear. It's cat food that reduced the major allergen and my suffering in as little as 21 days. Now, we feel closer than ever. If you have issues with cat allergens, you really need to try Purina One Live Clear.
Try new Purina One Live Clear today. Purina One, a difference from day one.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile with a message for everyone paying big wireless way too much. Please, for the love of everything good in this world, stop. With Mint, you can get premium wireless for just $15 a month. Of course, if you enjoy overpaying, no judgments, but that's weird. Okay, one judgment. Anyway, give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
And while we're talking about the survey, while we're really in this infant stage in this process and looking at this and bringing the community together for this issue, are there any voices or demographics that you're worried might be underrepresented in this data collection and in this survey? And how is City Council working to help make sure there's a broad array of input in this survey?
Well, I can tell you that one of the communities that I always worry about their voices being included is our refugee community. And I worked really closely with our refugee population when I was at the Boise Bicycle Project. Today, I still serve as the City Council liaison to our Neighbors United group, which is sort of a collective impact group of all of our different refugee resettlement organizations. We are working hard to make sure that some of these groups that are typically underrepresented and not included in these surveys are really involved in that process directly. So the great part is that once all this data and this input is collected, we actually get to select our teen advisory committee. And our teen advisory committee, as well as our community stakeholder advisory committee. So we're very specifically, when we get to that advisory group stage, going to be making sure that we have representations of a really diverse population of Boise, some of those other underrepresented groups, as well as different locations. So we're not just getting the youth who are actively engaged in this part of town, but we're also going to our other schools in our other part of town and really making sure that geographically, age, all of our different types of demographics that we have here in Boise are part of this. And for me, that's the part I'm looking forward to the most, especially when you can put yourself in a room full of teens and youth who you're kind of letting their imagination run wild, and you're saying, okay, here's what we heard the problems are. Here's some proposed solutions. What do you think would work? What do you think would be the best way to move forward? What are we missing in this circumstance? It's a pretty magical thing that I've gotten to see several times. And that's the part I think that I'm looking forward to the most.
Well, and I love that so much. I know it's popular or just a common phrase. People will be like, oh, the kids today. Oh, I think people have been saying that forever. But I have noticed the youth today are very engaged. They're very passionate, and they aren't afraid to say how they feel or to let people know if something is a problem. And so I do think giving them this opportunity, I do think the Boise youth will rise to the occasion.
You're right. I mean, they know so much more about what's going on in the community and in the world than I ever did when I was their age. And part of that is just the access to information and the amount of information that they're taking in every single day. And we didn't necessarily have to experience that much, or at least I didn't for my demographic. And I didn't feel the weight of the world on an everyday basis. And so we can complain about the youth today, or people can complain about it, but we do not know what it's like to be in their shoes, because their youth experience is completely different different than ours was. And of course, they're going to react to it differently. But one of the things that I know is that I think they're smarter than I was. And oftentimes I don't think that we give them the opportunity to make a difference. We say that we want to listen to them, and we do, but we don't always act on it. Here's actually giving them the tools and saying, hey, we want you to change what the city of Boise looks like for generations of youth in the future. How do you want it to look? And we're letting them guide that process. And I think that that's really important.
Okay, Jimmy, getting to the nuts and the bolts where the rubber hits the road, what kind of a budget has been allocated for developing and implementing the youth roadmap?
So the city council, we have what we call council contingency funds. We've used some funds to address some really unsafe intersections and get those things built out a little bit more. I got $100,000 approved by our city council in 2024 to launch and push this initiative through for an entire year. And the nuts and bolts of that means that we take a consulting group who is specialized in gathering data, doing these focus groups, doing these surveys and compiling this information. So we are paying them to guide us through this process, but we're also dedicating a really large amount of staff time as well. So every single one of our departments at the city of Boise, whether it's the police department or the library or Parks and Rec, they have a staff that's probably working more directly with youth and more directly with teens. And so they are dedicating time to be part of this process as well. So when you say $100,000, it sounds like a large amount of money. Some of that's going to our consultant that's helping us through this process, but some of it's the dedicated time that we're giving to staff to be a part of this process as well. Also paying for the outreach that we're going to be doing in all sorts of different parts of town and all these different types of things. So $100,000, it's a chunk of change. It's definitely a large amount of money. And so we are taking it really seriously, but I really do think that it will have a long-term impact on the city that is worth far more than $100,000. And if we started to think about what's the price that we want to pay to help address mental health, to decrease suicide in our city, to create a city where youth who graduate from high school don't leave here and never come back. To me, that has a whole lot of value, and it's completely worth investing both the money and also the time for this effort. And I think that Boise has a chance to lead here in a way that a lot of other communities are kind of sitting back and not knowing what to do. So we got to try to do something. And to me, it's absolutely worth the cost.
Boise's been ranked the best city to raise a family a couple of times, at least once, but it seems like we've made that list a couple of times. We love it and we hate it. And so some people might see that national ranking and think, hey, we're already doing really well for families. What would you say to them to make the case for investing more in youth support right now?
I would say that we are doing really well for families. And I do think that Boise is probably one of the best places for youth in the country. We're a really safe community. We're a community that's really welcoming. We've got great schools and great school districts and great teachers. We've got all these incredible nonprofits. And I don't think I could find a single teacher or a single nonprofit leader or community center leader who would say, I don't think that there's anything else we could do. Nobody is saying that. Every single person that I'm talking to is saying there is so much more we need to do for our youth. And I don't know any parents in the community right now who aren't worried a little bit about mental health, that aren't worried about social isolation, that don't want their teens to be getting out there and interacting with each other more and getting more involved in the community. And I don't know any teens that feel like they have enough agency and enough power to impact their future. And so I would say that we're doing good, but that doesn't mean that there still isn't an opportunity and there still isn't a problem that we're trying to address. So yes, we're doing a great job, but give an opportunity for teens to actually do something. And I think what will happen is we'll be surprised how much more we can actually do.
When this is being implemented, I don't mean if like it won't be, but like if this is successful, Jimmy, what would that look like to you?
To me, it's that this won't be the end, that this will be the beginning of youth being more involved in the city and their ability to actually impact the city that they're in. So this should not be a one and done process. This is something, like I said, we should be looking through a youth lens. I hope we know what teens really want to see, and we're not just building what elected officials want, that if we're building an apartment complex through a youth lens, that apartment complex actually looks a little bit different in the future. than it does today. This is sort of more of a personal thing. I hope we have like more places for kids to easily get outside in every single neighborhood. And as Boise grows, it gets a little bit harder to do that. And if you live on the bench, or if you live in South Boise, I believe that access to open space is something that we've heard teens asking for. So I hope that we have a city where kids have places to go, kids can be outside, kids can breathe fresh air. And so I've got sort of some things that I hope, turn out from it, but the youth will be the ones guiding the process. But I hope that they get to enjoy the city that I grew up in as much as I did.
No, I think you mentioning that those are similar things I've heard from my teens as well, that it seems like from where we landed in the pandemic, where everyone was more inside, more isolated, there has been more of this desire to be outside more, to be able to kind of roam a little bit like we did when we were kids. And it is just trickier and trickier to find places where I feel safe with my kids doing that where we live. And so I think I'm glad that that's a focus. I'm glad as a parent to hear that's a focus, because that's been something we've been trying to brainstorm how to make that more accessible for our own kids. So Jimmy, the survey is open through June. And then results will be published or made available to the public when?
Once that survey gets completed and compiled, council will probably get a presentation. So sort of an initial check-in, which will then be available to the public, because those are all public meetings whenever the council gets together. And that's when we'll start forming those advisory committees who are taking that information, dialing in a little bit more. There'll be another presentation to council in the fall that kind of say, hey, this is what we're hearing. We're getting close to putting this all together into a final format. Is there anything else that you all want to see? And then eventually, before the very end of the year, it should come to us in our final form. There'll be a public meeting for that, for everyone at that point to have looked through the document that we are going to approve and adopt, hopefully. So there will be several points along the way where the public and council will get bits of information, have a chance to give a little bit more input as we kind of get closer to that final product.
Well, Jimmy, thank you so much. This is something that I'm quite excited about. I hope my kids are also excited about. So thank you so much for taking the time to break it down and explain how it could transform Boise.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity to talk about it. And thank you for taking the survey already. I appreciate it.
That's all for today here on CityCast Boise. If you enjoyed the episode, make sure and tell your friends about the show so they can take the survey too. We'll be back tomorrow morning with a look at why Boise homes are shrinking. Catch you then.